Hi, welcome everyone. I'm going to give folks just a moment to settle in here, so feel free to grab a coffee. We'll get started shortly. Hi, folks. If you're just joining us, we're going to wait another minute here just to let a few more folks trickle in, and then we'll dive right in. All right, let's get cracking. So thank you all for making time to join today's Function Point product webinar. Whether you're joining from the East Coast or the West Coast, between or beyond, I'm thrilled to have you here. And if you've attended one of our webinars before, welcome back. If this is your first time, we do these webinars once per quarter. They're all about giving you visibility into what we've recently released, what's coming next, and of course, how to get the most out of Function Point. So my name is Alec, and I am Function Point's product specialist. And I'm coming to you live today from beautiful Prince Edward Island. You might recognize me from previous webinars, or perhaps I was previously your agency's CSM, and if not, it is great to meet you now. A quick bit of housekeeping here. I am hosting solo today, so I may not be able to address or answer all of your questions in real time here. That said, please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A panel through the webinar. I'm going to do my best to answer as many as I can at the end of our session in our Q&A. And of course, anything I don't get to, I will follow up on afterwards. So let us start now by looking at what we shipped in Q2. So some of you may already be using these new features, others might be seeing them for the first time today. And let's break it down here month by month. So April saw a couple of key updates. First was customizable admin fees. Now, technically we released this just in time for our last product webinar, and we gave a demo then. And as such, I won't be covering it today. So if you do want to see a full demo and explanation, I'd highly recommend checking out that recording, which is just on our YouTube channel. It's all there. Also in April, we introduced smarter percentage aggregation, which improves reporting accuracy in pivot grids in our BI reporting module. And image previews, which I'll be showing off today. It's a small update that makes a big difference if you upload images to Function Point as part of your creative workflow. Then in May, we rolled out a couple of features here. One was expense duration. This is a new field for external expenses on your estimates. It gives you more accurate cost modeling, especially useful for time-based vendor costs, as well as project level notes. So this is something that allows you to track communication more effectively across jobs, estimates, and the project as a whole. And then in June, we released a feature in beta that's been high in demand, which is the task drawer. So to solicit feedback and assess performance, only a handful of agency partners were invited to participate, but we have already received some fantastic feedback, and I'll have more to share on the full rollout timeline at the end of today's session. All right, let's dig into a few of these in more detail, starting with project level notes. So one of the most requested improvements that we've heard from teams is the need to centralize notes and project communication. Historically, you would have had to balance between estimates and jobs to add and track relevant communication, approvals, and other internal notes. So this is the case no longer. You can now add notes directly at the project level. And better yet, the new Project Notes tab on projects will consolidate and include all notes made at the project level, but also those made within estimates or jobs linked to that project. So here you get the full context in one place. No more hunting through individual jobs to piece together the conversation. So let's walk through what that looks like in practice here with just a quick demo. So here we are in Function Point. You can imagine that we've just kicked off a big new project, maybe something like a fall rebrand campaign. As the AE, I want to capture some internal notes coming out of our discovery session. These aren't tied to a particular deliverable or a job yet. They're more about maybe initial direction, tone, and expectations. So I'm going to head to that project in function point, and I'm going to go ahead and click Add Note. Now, I should actually say here, you may have renamed this module projects to something else in your system, for example, campaigns, but the functionality I'm going to show is the same. Anyway, I'm going to click Add Note, Add New and Add Note. I'm going to call this Discovery Meeting Recap. And here I can jot down highlights from the meeting, like so. When I hit save, that project is now stored at the project level, and no job or estimate association is needed, just general communication tied to the project. So fast forward a bit, and now let's say that my team is working on an estimate for the same project, and they've added a note to capture some client feedback on pricing. That note, even though it's added at the estimate level, is also going to show up here on this new Project Notes tab. Same goes for any jobs we spin up during this project. If anyone adds like a production note to a job, for example, it too will roll up into this project level notes view. So here we can see what it looks like. What you end up with is a single consolidated timeline of communication across every phase of work from estimate to delivery. And I don't need to dig through individual jobs or guess where an important note was left. It's all here in one view. So of course, that one note that we just added, and I've got a note related to an estimate and one related to another job here, all in one place. And that's it for project level notes. I would say this is a much requested feature, giving visibility for agencies that heavily use projects like this. Next up is external expenses. So this is something we're going to talk about specifically when it comes to your estimates. Now, before this release, external expense costs could be entered either as a lump sum or be optionally calculated using a quantity and a rate. Now, that works fine for many expenses, but what about cases where you need to estimate for a number of days? So you may have gotten by using the quantity field for this too, but with only one quantity field, you couldn't have that third variable to the calculation. So now you can enter a duration in days as part of our cost calculation for external expenses on estimates. Again, that means you can estimate costs like a week-long video shoot or a 3-day rental or a day rate contractor, all without having to fudge the numbers using quantity. As part of this same release, we did also introduce a printout setting to include the cost calculation on effort printouts. It's either for, say, internal use or to convey that calculation to clients. And for any agencies listening here that don't need this, so don't worry, this feature is optional and it is opt-in, so it can be toggled on and off in your system settings. Now with that here, let's jump into another quick demo, as I think it might be easier to understand the benefit here after seeing it in action. So let's look at a new estimate together to see how this works. Here's an estimate for a rebrand video. We can imagine I've just created it and we're still building out our pricing. So I'll switch to our services tab here and click Edit Services. We've got two service groups for this estimate, one for some agency services and then one for expenses. Within our expense group, I have a videographer expense. Now perhaps this vendor charges a daily rate, let's say $900 per day. And we've booked them for a 3-day shoot. Historically, we'd have had to perhaps do the math ourselves and enter $2,700 into this cost field. Or we could have calculated the cost by quantity and rate only. But what if we wanted to book 2 videographers for a 3-day shoot? So in this case, I'm going to click Enter by quantity and rate. And you'll see what we have here is a new duration field in addition to our existing quantity and rate fields. So duration, let's say it's 3, it's a 3-day shoot, but perhaps quantity here is 2. So I'm going to use 2 videographers, and that day rate is the same, 900. And you'll notice now that the system calculates the cost properly to $5,400 here. If I click calculate, you'll see it's saved for me here. I can see the total cost as well as what that calculation entailed. This is still independent from markup, so I can still apply a markup percentage on top of that, which at 25% comes out to $67.50. So this gives us an accurate cost breakdown that reflects both the nature of the expense and the vendor's billing model in this case. Go ahead and click save. I mentioned there's a printout aspect to this too, so let's look at the print preview. Here's my printout, and I've configured it to display detailed breakdowns in this case. And sure enough, the external expense line clearly shows 3 days at 2 videographers at $900 per day for a day rate, with that cost coming up to $5,400, and of course, our markup on top of that. So this does help ensure transparency, both for internal reviews as well as client-facing printouts. Again, if your agency doesn't deal with this type of expense or prefers to keep things simple, this is a feature that must be enabled via system settings. So if you do deal with this type of expense, it does eliminate awkward workarounds and gives you greater pricing precision on estimates. All right, let's dip back into our presentation here. And next up, let's talk about something small but very useful, which is image previews. Now, we've all experienced the frustration of having to open up an image in a new tab or having to download an image just to see what it is. And if you're reviewing dozens of files, say from briefs or note or file or task comments, those clicks can add up. So with this release, when you hover over an image file name anywhere in function point, whether it's on the brief, the file tab, or perhaps most usefully from a task or a note comment, you'll see a thumbnail preview without having to click or download. Again, that includes file trees too, so you can spot check visuals right there in context. This helps to keep you focused on work, reduce downloads, and of course gives your creatives and account teams a smoother review workflow. So this one is pretty self-explanatory, but let's see it quickly in action here by having another demo. All right, so first, let's say I'm reviewing a brief for that Safeway fall rebrand campaign. And if you're using our client portal add-on, this may have been something that was submitted by your client directly, but whoever it is, they've uploaded for us here a few reference images along with our project details. So these could be logos, style references, maybe some past campaign screenshots. But you'll notice here, when I hover over any of these file names, a thumbnail appears automatically for me. So I don't have to click or download or open anything in a new tab here. I get the visual confirmation I need right where I am, which is pretty useful stuff. Another example here, let's jump into a task or a note comment. Go back to my project notes tab. And I have one here with a couple of files, I believe. Yeah, so here I can see I've got my note with a couple of comments. Maybe my creative director left a comment with a couple of files from my team. Normally I'd have to download the file and open it, but again, now I can just hover over the file name and immediately see what I'm dealing with. So really, really useful stuff. I'm not losing context having to navigate away from this page. As mentioned, it does also work in the file tree views that show up in various places across function point, like on job or company pages. So the rule of thumb is anywhere you see image file names, you'll get that hover preview. So a simple, but I'd say pretty useful enhancement to be sure if your agency regularly uploads images as part of your workflow. Next up here, a very powerful change for those of you doing reporting in pivot grids. Until now, calculated percentage column data wasn't aggregated in a particularly meaningful way. So you would simply see an average, which may be useful in some contexts, but when it comes to financial reporting, is either not useful or even misleading when you're trying to derive insights from the data. But now we've introduced a new smart aggregation method for these percentage columns, which we call f sum of x. When selected, function point will recalculate your summary percentages based on the underlying data rather than averaging visible rows. So to be clear, with f sum of x, we're telling the system, don't average the percentages, instead go back to the raw values those percentages were based on, sum them up, and then recalculate that percentage. So just keep in mind, this method is only available for custom calculated columns, and it's enabled per column in the pivot grid builder. I don't want to understate here how useful this is, so let's see this one in action in a quick demo. All right, so let's open up Function Point's BI reporting module. And I'm going to open up an existing report as a pivot grid, my profit margin report here. So here's our profit margin report as a pivot grid. It's a fairly simple pivot grid. I've got columns for revenue and cost, and then a margin percentage. And then my rows are grouped first by company name, and I can expand them to see jobs related for that company. But here's the problem. So by default, the margin percentage here, the total I have at the bottom, as well as the summary amounts I have for each client, these are calculated simply as an average of all the rows above or within. So for those of you quick on the math, you might have even noticed that this 66% here I see is simply an average of the data and not actually based on the underlying data. So this might be the desired behavior in some reporting contexts, but here that does mean that a tiny job with a huge margin could skew the summary results, even if most of our revenue is coming from lower margin projects. So let's fix that with this report. First thing I'm going to do is find my margin percentage column over on the left here and go into the column settings. So I'll select this three-dot icon. Then I'll point to aggregate, and I see the various aggregation methods I can select from. What I'm looking to do is switch my aggregation from average to f sum of x. So function point now recalculates the summary based on total revenue and total cost in this case. So it's summing those values across all rows and then computing the true overall margin. This gives us a far more accurate view of how we're actually performing in this case. So this is a percentage here I can rely upon, 87% across all my jobs for these clients, as well as these summary percentages for individual clients. So these should now be recalculated based on the totals for that client. And this method applies to any calculated percentage column. So if you're tracking utilization or internal markup, effective hourly rates, or any other percentage-based KPI, this lets you roll it up in a way that truly reflects what's happening in your business. But I will remind you of the caveat here. It is only available for calculated columns with a percentage result. But once you start using it, you will quickly see here how much cleaner, how more honest your reports become. So those are highlights of what we shipped last quarter here, but now let's talk about what is coming next. So Q3 2025 will finally see the wide release of the task drawer. And this is something that we're going to be bundling alongside our upcoming UI refresh. So these two will land together as a single cohesive update. Not only will the task drawer give us a faster way to view and to update tasks from anywhere in the system, but the UI refresh is going to bring some improved consistency, spacing, and modern touches across function point. Later in the second half of this year, we're going to be rolling out multiple new integrations. Specifically, we're talking about HubSpot, Teams, Slack, and Outlook. These are all on the roadmap. And the first of these releases is imminent here. We will be releasing these in stages, and so you can expect regular updates from us as each goes live, but those are all coming very, very soon. For the rest of the year round, of course, you can continue to see minor enhancements released on a regular cadence, whether it's a small but useful feature or some optimization or performance boost. We will squeeze these in between larger releases. And then looking ahead, the next major feature on our long-term roadmap is subtasks. So now we've heard loud and clear from agencies that more task hierarchy is needed, and we are currently scoping this with input from our partner advisory group. And while I'm not ready here to share a specific release quarter, you can confidently expect this to land in 2026. So there's a lot here on the horizon for us, which is exciting stuff. Now, with that in mind, before we move to Q&A, I do also want to give a sneak peek of the task drawer. And while I don't have a live demo for you today, because we are still responding to some feedback from our beta testers, I can show you a quick screenshot of something I captured earlier today. So this is a screenshot of function point with our task drawer here as the slide out component on the left, or on the right rather. So again, for context, the task drawer is a slide out panel. It appears when selecting a task anywhere in function point, whether it's a task list or the work planning view, etc. Instead of having to navigate to the full task details page, the drawer lets you make updates right from the current screen, keeping you in context and saving clicks. The goal here is to streamline task management. So view, edit, add comments, check dependencies, all from one unified panel. As mentioned, this is going to be included with our upcoming UI refresh release. So expect to see much more communication about this very, very shortly. We're very, very excited about this release. So funny hosting solo. I'm just speeding through without any other discussion today. So that does bring us to the end of our core content, but we do still have a few minutes left. So we can switch gears here and take a look at any questions that have come in. I will try to answer as many as I can right now. And again, anything I miss, I will be following up on after our session. Someone's asked, how do you enable the new external expense duration field in system settings? Now, this is related to our external expense duration release. So let me take a quick look at that. I'll go ahead and share my screen again. So to enable the new external expense duration field, I'm going to first navigate to admin, system setup, and then system preferences. So for any admins on our call today, this is where we are configuring details about our system. Specifically, I'm going to switch to the Build tab. And here you'll see our new external expense duration toggle. So it's this checkbox here that configures whether or not we're toggling that field on or off. And currently I have it set to on, so it is showing that field in my system. That is a good question. There was a comment here that couldn't see my printout that I showed in the early example. And I apologize, I think I was juggling tabs here. As a reminder, we were looking at a specific estimate, that rebrand video, and we were talking about the printout that we were looking at for this estimate. So let me go ahead and show that again. All right, hopefully you can see it on my screen this time. This is the estimate printout that I was referring to. So just to orient us here, what we were looking at here is this detailed breakdown for our videographer expense. So you'll see here I have my videographer expense and I have a breakdown of the duration, quantity, and rate on my estimate. And then the total cost right here. Of course, my markup percentage, and then the total including markup to the right. So really, really useful for a transparency for internal reviews, or if you wanted to expose that calculation to our client-facing printouts. And again, this is something that is configured optionally in printout settings, so we aren't forced to show this calculation on our printouts. But good question. Okay, time for a couple more questions here. There's a question on whether or not there's going to be resources in function point on how to use the task drawer. Absolutely. So we are going to put out a marketing campaign about this. There will be information on benefits of the task drawer, how to use it. There will be a detailed guide published alongside that release. So I don't have anything to show just yet today, but you can expect that there will be resources. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to your agency's CSM, and they'd be more than happy to give a demo or provide you links to some of those resources. All right, I think time for one more question here. Eric's got a question about the work planning view. So not necessarily related to the content of our discussion today, but let's just look at this briefly. Eric's question is it possible to create a new assigned or progress rectangle to distinguish an internal task versus a client task? It's a good question. Not as such right now. So currently these are hard-coded statuses. So for example, assigned is always going to be blue. Draft is always going to be purple. We are looking at the possibility of introducing that kind of functionality in the future, but for now we are reliant on these hard-coded task statuses and their colors in the legend. But good question. All right, I'll give a couple more seconds for any other questions that might come in. No, I think we're a quiet group today. Well, folks, I think that's a wrap. But thank you again for being here. We'll see you again really soon at our next Thought Leadership webinar coming out soon. Until then, it's been great chatting with you and have a great rest of your day.